In this lesson, we're going to be going over analysis and the concept of getting it when you're reading versus critical thinking while you're reading, and summarizing versus analyzing a text. We're doing this because I noticed that some of you still have trouble in your essays differentiating between summary and analysis, so a lot of your thesis statements end up being summary, which leads to dead end analysis in your body paragraphs. The other issue is that it seems like a lot of you are reading the text just to understand what's happening, but you have to go beyond understanding and really ask questions and think for yourself about what's happening in the text. Come up with your own conclusions about what the author means to do and why the characters are acting a certain way, or why a theme exists in the story, rather than just recognizing that there is that theme in the story. These are crucial skills you'll need for all of your classes, but especially your English class next semester. So here I wrote a list of what the difference is between getting the story, understanding the story, versus thinking critically about the story. So when you're getting it, you understand the plot, you know the characters and their actions, you comprehend the dialogue, and you can visualize imagery. Just because you know an image is in the story doesn't mean that it's your interpretation. That's actually just what the author is presenting to you. So just because you know that there is a man with enormous wings in the story, A Very Old Man with Enormous Wings, doesn't mean that you're analyzing anything. You're just repeating what is happening in the story. And then critical thinking, you can identify symbols in the story. So once you notice that an image is repeated many times, you can start thinking, oh, what does that symbolize for the story? Asking questions, you can start asking, like we talked about at the beginning of this semester, asking questions about what is happening in the story, why it's happening, wondering why the author does something in the story, maybe why the author uses a specific technique to tell the story, or why the author decides for a specific theme to cross over from one story to another. Some of you were pondering why Marquez uses irony in a lot of his stories. That's a great question to ask and answer in an essay. And recognizing a larger theme or concept and characters' actions and connecting, recognizing a larger theme or concept and connecting characters' actions to that concept. So you can do a bit of summary and getting it in order to show your analysis of a theme or concept. So again, why is solitude such a crucial theme in Marquez's work? And you can use some of the characters' actions or the narrator's descriptions of the characters to explain why Marquez might be using solitude. And you could say Marquez uses solitude as a theme in many of his works in order to critique others' reaction to solitude. So you want to think critically in order to write critically. If you are not thinking critically while you are reading, then you cannot write critically when you write an essay. If you are just reading to understand the story, basically, then you are going to end up summarizing in your essay. The reason is that if you are focused just on understanding the plot and what the characters are doing, you're going to think that it's really great that you understand the plot and what the characters are doing. But if you think critically while you are reading, you'll come up with more intellectual ideas for your paper. So here are some sample thesis statements. We have a summary thesis statement, and you have a summary thesis statement and a critical analysis thesis statement. So we have many characters in the story are alone. This is a summary statement. You don't want to end your introduction saying many characters in the story are alone. This is summary because you're basically just saying what happens in the story. You're not showing your own interpretation of why it's happening or why Marquez has a lot of characters or be alone. You're just saying that they are. In the critical analysis version that you see on the right, you can see it says, Marquez uses solitary characters to expose both the cruelty and benevolence of humans. So that is more analysis. It's a little bit on the summary side, but it's definitely more analytical and will make for a much more interesting paper. It's analytical because you are asking the question, why are so many characters alone in his stories? This is the answer. Marquez uses solitary characters to expose both cruelty and benevolence of humans. So we have a summary statement here, the second one. Finally, the old man flies away and is free. That's a summary statement. It's just saying what happens at the end of the story. You can feel proud that you understand what happens at the end of the story, but that doesn't mean that it is a good an interpretation of what happens or why it happens. You're just telling people what they already know if they read the story. So you want to give them new information, a new way of looking at what happens in the story and why it happens. So this is an analytical thesis. The old man flying away in the end symbolizes freedom for oppressed people. So then in that essay, you would have to talk about why the old man is there. You'd have to talk about why the old man symbolizes oppressed people and why Marquez has him fly away. The people find beauty in the drowned man. Again, this is not interpretation. This is very clear and obvious in the story. They think he's handsome. They find beauty in him. That's not an analysis. That's just summary. So a critical analysis version of this would be that the villagers find beauty in a drowned man displays Marquez's critique of humans as imaginative followers. This should say displays Marquez's, not of Marquez's. So again, that the villagers find beauty in a drowned man displays Marquez's critique of humans as imaginative followers. This is more analytical because it's asking the question, why does Marquez have people find beauty in a drowned man? And then you're answering it in your thesis. So let's look at another example from a totally different story. The Great Gatsby is a very famous story in America. Some of you, I'm sure, have read it. And this person shows an example of what analysis looks like and what summary looks like, and urges writers to strive for 90% interpretation or analysis and only 10% summary in your essay. So only 10% of your essay should be summary. The summary serves to provide context for your reader so that your reader who has not read the short story or the novel can understand the meaning of your argument and your analysis. And that's the only point. Because remember, your reader can find the story and read it, but you don't want to assume that they have read it. So let's look what they say. Analysis is examination, evaluation, dissection, interpretation, original opinion, reading between the lines, connecting to other knowledge, etc. It is the goal of most expository essays. The purpose of your essay, this is very important, the purpose of your essay is to analyze. That's the reason you're writing. You're not writing an essay to show that you understand something. You're writing an essay to provide a new way of looking at something. The analyzer starts with a quotation and question and uses it to show his or her understanding and interpretation. Summary is recapitulation, review, retelling a story or scene without original thoughts or interpretations. So again, summary does not contain original thought. Sometimes it might feel like you are providing an original thought because you're proud that you understand the text. But again, if it's just saying something that happens in the text that somebody else could interpret as well, you are not providing anything original. You're not analyzing. Summary is not the goal of expository essays. It is usually easier than analysis because it requires less thought. Assume that the reader of your essay knows the story and needs just the slightest reminder. I don't necessarily agree with this. So this author says you should assume that the reader read your essay, read the story. I think that you should assume the reader can read the story, but assume that they haven't read it yet. So you provide enough context for them to understand the meaning of your analysis, but you don't assume that they've read it, which means you can't go back and forth between the beginning and the end and the middle of the story in your analysis. You should try to have some kind of logical step in your analysis and summary of the story. Okay, so here's an example of summary. Even though I disagreed with this last sentence, I still think that their examples are good. So here's the quotation. I'm just going to read through this and then explain what the difference is between the summary and the analysis, although it's pretty clear. As Gatsby is driving Nick to lunch, he notices a change in his manner. We hadn't reached West Egg Village before Gatsby began leaving his elegant sentences unfinished and slapping himself indecisively on the knee of his caramel-colored suit. Look here, old sport, he broke out surprisingly. What's your opinion of me anyhow? Summary. Nick is riding with Gatsby to lunch. He notices that Gatsby is speaking differently, leaving his sentences unfinished. Gatsby asks Nick what he thinks of him. There is no opinion or interpretation in the above statement. It adds nothing to our understanding of the passage. It just shows that you understood the passage. It just paraphrases what is happening in the passage, but it is not analysis. Analysis here. In this scene, we see a break in Gatsby's affected calm. Nick had noticed previously that he picked his words with care. Now he leaves sentences unfinished. His agitation is seen also in his physical movements, as he slaps himself indecisively on the knee. Gatsby is making plans to meet Daisy again, and his change in manner is brought on by his nervousness about seeing her. This is analysis because the narrator doesn't actually say that Gatsby is nervous about seeing her. The reader is noticing this connection. Gatsby's insecurity about what Daisy might think of him after all these years leads him to ask Nick for his opinion of him. Again, this is analysis because it is not clear in the story. The narrator doesn't say that Gatsby feels this way, but the reader is making a connection between how Gatsby acted in another scene and noting how he's acting in this scene. A fact which surprises Nick because it is such a change from Gatsby's usual aloof confidence. In fact, Gatsby is so rattled as he draws near the critical moment in achieving his dream that he is unable to even be direct with Nick. Instead of just asking him if Nick would plan a meeting, he arranges for Miss Baker to speak to him about this manner. This is a crucial moment in Gatsby's life, and its weight is illustrated in his unusual behavior. Okay, so we see a connection here. What I like about this paragraph is we have this topic sentence. We see a break in Gatsby's affected calm. Normally he acts very calm. And then here at the end, the conclusion sentence kind of brings it back to that topic sentence, this argument right here. This is a crucial moment in Gatsby's life, and its weight is illustrated in his unusual behavior. We see a break in his normal self here, and we see unusual behavior here. So these two words, even though they are different, they mean the same thing. They're talking about Gatsby being different in this scene. We don't know what thesis the person is supporting, but we can tell that they have a clear topic sentence and a clear concluding sentence to this paragraph and very appropriate quotations to support the paragraph. And notice that the person takes parts of this above quotation and puts them in just a few words each at a time, but doesn't just provide the entire quote in one paragraph. Okay, so the note under here says, notice that the writer has used this passage to illustrate important changes in the character. The writer uses specific examples and ties the passage to other moments in the book. This is very important. This is something you should get used to doing as well. Tying the passage to other moments in the book to create your analysis, because a lot of analysis is connecting one thing from one page to, or a larger concept to something else in another part of the text. I want to point out a couple of things in the way that this is written. One thing, sometimes you can use the word we. I've used it before, but I typically like to say one can see a break in Gatsby's affected calm. That is the third person way of writing that. One can see, or the reader can see. And then there's another thing that I wanted to point out. I like how the author did this. So they put the quote, they embedded the quote within the sentence. That's what I went over last video, how to embed a quote in the sentence. We went over this semester, but none of you are using this, and I thought I might help you by showing you more examples. Notice how in order to fit the quote into the sentence grammatically, they had to change words. So whenever you change a word to fit, like you have to change it from I to him, or from me to him, you put it in parentheses. You replace the word and put the new word in parentheses. You really only do that with like short words like prepositions and pronouns and things like that. Okay, so after looking at that example, let's go back to the PowerPoint. I'll show you some of my examples. So this is, I'm giving you 3 paragraphs from my own writing, okay? And I'm going to talk about what they are, examples of, and why. So if you look at this paragraph, you can pause the video and read the whole thing. I'm just going to read a part of it. It says at the top, Friedrich Henry is an American lieutenant volunteering in the Italian Ambulance Corps. Friedrich's good friend Rinaldi introduces him to a nurse named Catherine Barkley. He is wounded at the front and is given leave to recover at a hospital, where he makes himself more ill by overdrinking. Due to his injury and illness, Friedrich spends more time with Catherine and comes to love her, but his thoughts are constantly directed towards action at the front. Throughout most of the novel, ... All right, so you can see here that this is very clearly summary. I only discuss the characters' actions. I go through the plot in order from beginning to end, and I do not provide any of my own interpretation of the plot, just my general understanding. This is just because this is a very long paper that I wrote, so I provided the reader with some context before providing my analysis to support my thesis. So let's look at this next paragraph. Hemingway developed a code for most of his protagonists, including Friedrich. He has dramatized in The Dislocated Hero the principal existentialist truth, the disparity between man and his condition, and the need to formulate a personal code, testing it against the reality of practical living, modifying it where necessary. Howard Berridge explains that the generally unspoken rules consist mainly of a strong work ethic and stoicism. He explains that his moral code was an effort to find meaning during the uncertain period. Why was the code so necessary? He asks. And then he answers, because in Hemingway's world, still shuddering in the aftermath of brutal war, the old values, faith in family, in country, and in a just and loving God, had been irreparably shattered. The rejection of religion is one way that soldiers find meaning. That religion does not matter to the men challenges society's pre-war ideas of both hero and Christianity. So if you look here, I have a topic sentence. Hemingway developed a code for most of his protagonists, including Friedrich. That means that this is summary and analysis, right? So I have this topic sentence. This is my analysis based on other people's analysis. So then I provide a quote that demonstrates the analysis of somebody else that led me to this conclusion. And then I summarize the work and analysis of Howard Berridge. And then I provide my own analysis in the last sentence. The rejection of religion is one way that soldiers find meaning. that religion does not matter to the men challenges society's pre-war ideas of both the hero and Christianity. This is analysis of these other authors' works to show how these examples fit with my overall thesis. My overall thesis is about how these stories, this novel challenges the idea of the hero from before World War I. So clearly, I'm very clearly going back to the thesis, to my overall thesis. But I'm starting with this topic sentence, which is the main idea of this entire paragraph, looking at the code for the protagonist to follow. So again, that was summary and analysis. Oops. This should say I begin. So I begin with an analytical statement, my topic sentence for the paragraph. I summarize the analysis of others, and I end the paragraph analyzing the text in my own way and leading back to the overall thesis, which also leads to my own analysis in the next paragraph. So let's look at this. This is my analysis using examples from the story. So this challenge is most evident. Notice how the last paragraph ended with that religion does not matter to the men challenges society's pre-war ideas. Here, I start the paragraph with this challenge is most evident in the relationship between the priest and the other soldiers at the mess. So I'm using this word and repeating it in order to transition from one paragraph to the next. Okay. The character Abruzzi, who we only know for a little while, makes fun of the priest nonstop. Abruzzi takes his aggression and boredom out on the priest, saying, "Priest today with girls, not true? Today I see priest with girls." That I felt was self-explanatory enough that I did not need to provide any other summary of this quote. Another soldier, the major, gives a possible reason for why they are making so much fun of the priest, whom Friedrich portrays as a very honest man. The Pope wants the Austrians to win the war, the major says. He loves Franz Joseph. That's where the money comes from. I am an atheist. Mocking the priest is a sign of many things, among them that the soldiers take their frustration out on religion rather than going toward it to find meaning. So my point here in these last two paragraphs was to show that the soldiers, rather than going towards Christianity, are actually going further away from it. And one of the examples is in their abuse of the priest. And this is an example of them mistreating the priest. And then here is another example. So I provide examples to support my topic sentence. And I analyze the examples to show how they support that topic sentence at the very end. So this is context and analysis. The context is here. The character Abruzzi, who we only know for a little while, makes fun of the priest nonstop. Abruzzi takes his aggression and boredom out on the priest, saying, so see, this is context. I needed to provide a little bit of context for my reader so they understand what's happening before I provide the quote. And then I introduce the quote, making it very clear that Abruzzi is talking here. So you never provide a quote without providing a little bit of context, just one small sentence, and then explaining who, or showing who is talking in that part. It could be the narrator, it could be a character, but you need to make sure it is clear for your reader who is speaking there. So again, you're assuming your reader does not have the story right in front of them, but they could, but they don't, right? So you need to make sure that you provide that introduction for your quotation. So I begin with the transition from the paragraph before using the word this challenge, referring to the challenge posed in the last sentence of the previous paragraph. The first sentence is the main argument of my paragraph, my topic sentence. I don't start with a summary statement, I start with a topic sentence. I provide context before introducing and providing examples from the text that support my topic sentence. I transition in the middle of the paragraph to add more context and examples. So if you look back, the transition is here. Another soldier, the major, gives a possible reason for why they are making so much fun of the priest. So again, this is an example of making fun of the priest, and then this is my transition to the next quotation, showing the reason why they are making fun of the priest. I don't just say they make fun of the priest and then not provide an example, because my reader might say, I don't know if they do make fun of the priest. I have to convince my reader that they do make fun of the priest and then show why. I conclude the paragraph by analyzing the examples and showing my reader how these examples support the topic sentence. So like I said before, this goes back to this sentence at the beginning. I always have like a sandwich. So you have a sandwich. You have your supporting argument. You have your context. You introduce a quote. You provide a quote. Sometimes you provide another quote, so you have to transition between the two quotes. And then you provide the other quote, and then you analyze. Okay, so summary again provides context for your reader of the full story to better understand the analysis, provides context before quotations to show how they fit into the larger picture. Oops. Go back. Analysis provides your personal interpretation of the text. Analysis is the reason you're writing at all, and analysis makes your thesis or central argument meaningful. Remember, there should be both summary and analysis in your essay, though your thesis should always be analysis. And remember that percentage. Only 10% of your essay should consist of summary, while 90% should consist of analysis. That's because even though you might be assuming that your reader has not read the story yet, you don't need to provide the entire story for your reader to understand, just enough context that they'll understand the meaning of your essay. And you can assume that the reader can get the story. That's why you provide a citation and a works cited page, so that they can look at exactly the version of the story that you are looking at when you're writing.